A U.S. Marine sent a secret signal at a rest stop. Only 3 German shepherds understood the warning. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Sergeant Jack Harrison, a seasoned U.S. Marine, had driven many miles in his career, but something about the quiet rest stop in the middle of nowhere felt off. It was late, the sky a dark blue that signaled the late hours of the night. The faint hum of his truck's engine was the only sound that broke the stillness. He pulled over, not out of necessity, but more because his gut told him to. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, nothing but the harsh glare of the streetlights illuminating the fog. The rest stop was empty, save for the few cars parked, some with drivers inside, most sleeping. The air smelled of wet pavement and diesel, a sharp contrast to the calm night. But then, Jack noticed them. 3 German shepherds, their sleek coats a shadow against the dim lighting, standing near the back of the rest stop, watching him intently. The dogs weren't alone, there was a man in the distance, sitting in the shadows by a picnic table. Jack couldn't quite make him out, but the dogs, they were staring right at him, their eyes bright and calculating. Jack stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as he made his way to the dogs. The first thing he noticed was how still they were, not barking, not moving, just watching him. Something in his gut told him these weren't ordinary dogs. They were far too alert. He stopped a few feet away, keeping his distance. He had served in enough combat zones to know when something was off. These dogs were acting like sentries, waiting for something, or someone. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. He bent down, making eye contact with the largest of the 3. It was a familiar sight. German shepherds had always been known for their intelligence, but there was something else in this dog's gaze. It wasn't just curiosity. It was understanding. Jack had learned to read dogs on the battlefield, how they could sense things that humans couldn't. He lifted his hand slowly, not wanting to startle them. The moment he did, the dog's body stiffened, its posture becoming rigid. Jack had seen that stance before, when a dog was focused, ready. It was then that Jack felt a strange connection. He made a slight motion, as if sending a signal. The dog responded almost immediately, its eyes narrowing, the muscles in its back twitching as if it was acknowledging something unseen. Jack could hear his heart racing. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a secret had just passed between them. The other 2 dogs, standing at attention, shifted their position slightly, but didn't move away from the shadows. They were waiting for something. Jack took a deep breath, still feeling the tension in the air. He glanced back toward the man by the picnic table, but he was gone now, vanished into the darkness. He didn't know why, but he felt the urge to follow the dogs, to see what they had sensed. He could feel their silent communication, an understanding that stretched beyond words. The dogs were leading him somewhere. And he had no choice but to follow. Jack followed the German shepherds, his heart pounding in his chest as the dogs led him further into the shadows. The air around him seemed to grow colder, the quiet night pressing in like a thick blanket. He glanced back at his truck one last time before stepping deeper into the darkness. His boots crunched softly on the gravel, and the fog clung to the ground, swirling around his feet like smoke. The 3 dogs moved with purpose, their sleek bodies gliding through the mist without making a sound. Their eyes never left Jack, and each time they stopped, they glanced back, as if making sure he was still following. Jack's mind raced with questions. Why had they been watching him? Why did he feel an unexplainable urge to follow them? It was almost as if they were waiting for him to act, to make the first move. He had never experienced anything like this before. As he walked, he felt an odd connection to the dogs, a silent understanding. between them that felt ancient, unspoken. The largest of the three, a male with dark fur and intense amber eyes, stopped and looked at him, its body tense. Jack paused, his instincts telling him to stay still. He held his breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, without warning, the dog darted forward, its movements swift and fluid. Jack followed, his pulse quickening as he realized the dog was leading him to a secluded area behind the rest stop. The other two dogs stayed close, keeping a watchful eye on their surroundings. The area was dimly lit by a flickering streetlight, casting long shadows across the ground. As Jack approached, he saw something that made his heart skip a beat. There, lying in the dirt, was a small, unmarked crate, the kind used for transporting animals. It was old, the wood splintered and weathered by time, and it looked completely out of place in the middle of the quiet rest stop. The dogs stood by it, their eyes fixed on the crate, as if urging Jack to open it. He approached slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the latch. The moment his fingers touched the metal, a sharp bark broke the silence. Jack turned to see the largest dog, its posture alert, staring at the crate as if it knew what lay inside. He hesitated for a moment, then opened the crate. Inside, Jack found nothing but shredded newspaper and a faint smell of something metallic. There was no sign of any animal, but the eerie feeling in his gut told him something was very wrong. The dogs didn't move. They just watched, as if waiting for Jack to make the next move. He took a deep breath and looked around, trying to make sense of the situation. It was then that he heard a faint sound, something soft but unmistakable. It came from behind him. Jack spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm he kept in his jacket. But there was no threat. Instead, he found the other two dogs standing behind him, their eyes wide and searching the darkness. And then, in the distance, a figure appeared, stepping out from behind the fog. Jack couldn't make out the figure's face, but the silhouette was unmistakable, a man, tall and lean, wearing a dark jacket. He moved with purpose, his steps sure and steady as he approached Jack and the dogs. The man didn't speak at first. Instead, he stopped a few feet away, his eyes locking with Jack's. The tension in the air was palpable. Jack felt his heart race as the man took a step forward, then another. The dogs remained still, but Jack could sense their unease. He reached for his phone, ready to call for backup, but the man stopped him with a gesture. "No need for that," the man said, his voice low and calm. "These dogs know exactly what's going on. They've been leading you here for a reason." Jack didn't know what to say. His mind was spinning, trying to piece together the strange events of the last few minutes. The man looked at him, his gaze piercing, and for a moment, Jack felt as if the world had tilted sideways. "You're in danger, Sergeant," the man continued, his voice steady but urgent. "And so are they." The man took another step forward, his dark figure emerging from the fog like a ghost. Jack stood frozen, still processing the situation. The three German shepherds, once so vigilant, had now relaxed their stance, but their eyes never left the newcomer. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words, a connection that Jack couldn't quite understand. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, his voice calm but urgent, "I'm here to help." Jack's instincts screamed at him to be cautious, but something about the way the man spoke, the trust in the dog's silent behavior, made him hesitate. "Help?" Jack repeated, still gripping the side of his jacket where his gun rested. The man nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the dogs, then back to Jack. "You've been followed. By more than just those dogs." Jack's heart skipped a beat, his grip tightening on his jacket as the weight of the situation started to settle in. "What are you talking about?" Jack asked, his voice low but firm. "What are you warning me about?" The man took a breath, his eyes flicking over Jack's shoulder towards the distant rest stop. "You've been marked. There are people who are watching you, waiting. These dogs have been trained to find threats, and they know when you're in danger." They've already been protecting you, even before you knew it. Jack felt the chill of the night deepen around him as the man's words sank in. His mind raced with the possibilities, trying to piece together what was happening. "Who's been watching me?" he asked, his voice a little sharper now. The man shook his head slightly, a trace of regret in his eyes. "That's something I can't answer. Not yet. But what I can tell you is that you're involved in something much bigger than just a routine stop. Those dogs, they've seen things. And they've led you here for a reason." Jack looked back at the 3 German shepherds, still standing, still watching. He didn't know why, but he trusted the dogs. He could feel their alertness, their unwavering loyalty. They weren't just following him, they were protecting him. "Why now?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why did they lead me here?" The man's expression darkened, his voice lowering as if sharing a secret. "Because something is about to happen. Something you're not prepared for. And those dogs, they're your only warning." Jack took a step back, his heart pounding. His mind swirled with confusion and doubt. He had always trusted his training, his instincts, but this felt different. The man looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded toward the fog. "You need to follow them. They'll lead you to safety. The rest of the night is a blur of uncertainty, but you have to trust them." The 3 dogs suddenly moved in unison, their eyes locking with Jack's, as if urging him forward. Jack hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right, I'll follow." Without another word, the man turned and disappeared into the mist, his silhouette fading into the distance. Jack looked once more at the German shepherds and, with a deep breath, began to follow them. The air felt colder now, the darkness pressing in as they moved, but Jack knew one thing for certain: he wasn't alone. The dogs were with him. And they knew the way. As they moved through the fog, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far larger than anything he had ever imagined. But he was ready. For whatever came next, he would follow the dogs, his unexpected protectors, wherever they led. Jack moved swiftly through the fog, the German shepherds leading him like shadows in the night. The air was thick with mist, and the quiet was almost unbearable, broken only by the steady rhythm of their footsteps on the gravel. The dogs moved with purpose, their bodies low, their eyes scanning every corner of the rest stop. Jack could feel the weight of their focus, the silent communication between them. He trusted them completely. The further they went, the more Jack felt the tension building, like a storm on the horizon. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he knew that these dogs, these loyal companions, had been guiding him for a reason. The moon was barely visible through the haze, casting an eerie glow over the empty rest stop. It was as if the entire world had been swallowed by the fog, leaving them in a strange, quiet limbo. Jack's heart raced with anticipation. His training told him to stay alert, to be ready for anything. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. The lead dog, a large male with dark fur and piercing amber eyes, stopped abruptly and turned to face Jack. The other 2 dogs followed suit, coming to a halt in perfect synchrony. Jack stopped too, his senses on high alert. He glanced around, but there was no sign of danger, no sound, just the silence of the night pressing in on them. The dogs were looking toward something, their eyes focused on a spot just ahead. Jack took a cautious step forward, his hand resting on the handle of his sidearm. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with anticipation. And then, as if on cue, a distant sound broke the silence. It was faint, but unmistakable. A low hum, almost like a vibration in the air, coming from somewhere in the darkness. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The dogs didn't move, but their attention was fixed on the sound, their bodies tense and alert. Jack strained his ears, trying to make sense of the noise. It was coming closer. The hum grew louder, more distinct, until it became clear, it was the sound of something mechanical, something large. The dogs reacted instantly. The lead dog let out a low growl, a warning. Jack's instincts kicked in. He reached for his flashlight and switched it on, shining it toward the source of the sound. At first, there was nothing but darkness. But then, the light caught something. A large, black vehicle, its engine humming as it rolled slowly toward them. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was too quiet, too controlled. There was something off about the way it moved, the way it blended into the night. The dogs were still watching it, their posture rigid, their eyes locked onto the vehicle as it approached. Jack knew this wasn't just any vehicle. It was something more. Something dangerous. The vehicle stopped just a few feet away, its headlights cutting through the fog. Jack's hand hovered over his sidearm, ready for whatever came next. The vehicle's door opened slowly, and a figure stepped out. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden in the shadows. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching Jack with a calculating gaze. The dogs remained still, but Jack could feel their readiness, their silent command to stay alert. The man took a step forward, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. Jack didn't move, his senses sharp, his body tense. He could feel the weight of the moment, the quiet before the storm. The man's voice broke the silence. "I knew you'd come." Jack didn't respond, his eyes narrowing. "What is this?" he asked, his voice steady, but his mind racing. The man smiled faintly, a cold, knowing smile. "You've been chosen, Sergeant. This is just the beginning." Jack's heart raced as the man's words sank in. Chosen? For what? Before he could ask another question, the dogs reacted. They moved toward the man, their bodies low and ready. Jack could feel the shift in the air, the tension building once again. This was no ordinary encounter. He was being pulled into something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. And the dogs, his loyal companions, were the only ones who understood. They were leading him somewhere, and he had no choice but to follow. He took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. The fog was thick, the night silent, but Jack knew one thing for sure, he wasn't walking this path alone. Jack's mind raced as the man's words echoed in the thick air. Chosen for what? He asked again, his voice steady but his body tense. The figure in front of him didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped forward, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as if he were walking toward an inevitable fate. The German shepherds remained at attention, their eyes locked on the stranger, unwavering. Jack could feel the weight of their watchful gaze. "What do you want from me?" Jack demanded, his heart pounding in his chest. The man's cold smile faded into something more serious. "It's not what I want from you, Sergeant," he said, his voice low and measured. "It's what they want." Jack's gaze shifted to the dogs, who remained silent but intensely focused on the man. The way they stood, so alert, so ready, it was as if they knew something he didn't, something he wasn't prepared for. The man turned his attention to the dogs, his eyes softening for a moment. "These dogs," he continued, "they're part of something much larger than you or me. They're trained for a purpose you can't even imagine." Jack felt his stomach tighten. He had heard stories, seen the training firsthand, but this? This was beyond anything he had expected. Purpose? Jack echoed, stepping closer to the man, not fully trusting him but feeling an undeniable pull to understand. The man nodded slowly. "They've been waiting for you. The signal you sent, they recognized it. These dogs can sense things, Sergeant, things you won't see coming." Jack's pulse quickened. What was the man talking about? What was this about signals and purpose? The German shepherds, who had been so quiet until now, suddenly shifted. The lead dog, the largest of them all, moved toward Jack, its amber eyes fixed on him. The dog stopped just a few feet away, sitting down, its gaze unwavering. Jack froze. "They've chosen you," the man said quietly, his voice almost a whisper now. "And now, you have a choice. You can walk away, go back to your life. Or you can follow them. They know what's coming. And they'll lead you. Jack stared at the dog, feeling the weight of its eyes, the depth of something unspoken between them. He didn't know why, but in that moment, he felt the urge to follow, to trust. Where will they lead me? Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked up at the fog swirling around them, the darkness stretching out in every direction. That, he said, is the question you'll have to answer. But know this, what lies ahead is not just a mission. It's a path you're meant to take, whether you understand it or not. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. He had always trusted his instincts, but this was something else entirely. The dogs, the man, the strange, inexplicable feeling in the air, everything seemed to be pulling him towards something bigger than he could comprehend. I don't understand, Jack said, his voice cracking slightly. The man turned to leave, his footsteps silent in the thick fog. You will, he replied, his voice fading into the night. Follow them. They know the way. Jack watched the man disappear into the mist, and for a moment, everything was still. The dog stood, waiting for him to make his decision. Jack's mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. He had been chosen for something, and he couldn't ignore it. He stepped forward, following the dogs as they led him into the unknown. The fog seemed to part just enough for him to see what lay ahead, a path that only the German shepherds could see, but one he was now bound to follow. Jack followed the dogs deeper into the mist, his mind still racing with the strange events of the night. The fog had thickened around him, but the 3 German shepherds moved ahead with confidence, their eyes shining through the haze. Jack trusted them now more than ever. He didn't know where they were leading him, but there was something undeniable about their certainty. It was as if they knew exactly where to go, as if they had been this way before. The silence was broken only by the sound of Jack's boots crunching on the gravel and the occasional soft panting of the dogs. He could feel the tension in the air, the anticipation of something waiting ahead, but what? The path they were on seemed endless, winding through the thick forest surrounding the rest stop. Jack could barely make out the outlines of the trees, their shapes blending with the mist, but the dogs moved forward without hesitation. Jack's eyes flicked to the sky, the first light of dawn beginning to break through the fog, casting a pale glow on the path ahead. He glanced at his watch. It was still early, but it felt like hours had passed since he first stepped out of his truck. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in. What was happening? Why had he been chosen for this? And why had the dogs, his only guide, led him here? His thoughts were interrupted as the lead dog, the large male with the dark coat, suddenly stopped. The other 2 dogs followed suit, their eyes now focused on a spot just ahead. Jack stopped too, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm, though he wasn't sure why. He felt no immediate threat, but the dog's behavior told him that something was about to happen. The lead dog turned its head slowly, meeting Jack's gaze with its amber eyes. Jack could feel the unspoken communication between them. The dog wasn't afraid. In fact, it seemed calm, as if it knew exactly what was coming. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure what he was waiting for, but the sense of foreboding grew stronger with each passing second. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from the mist ahead. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his silhouette barely visible through the fog. He moved toward Jack and the dogs with purpose, his step steady and deliberate. The dogs didn't react. They stood still, their eyes locked on the man, but they didn't growl or bark. Jack's heart rate quickened. He didn't know who this man was, but there was something about the way he walked, the way the dogs responded to him, that made Jack uneasy. The man didn't speak immediately. Instead, he stopped a few feet away from Jack and the dogs, his gaze moving from the German shepherds to Jack. Jack held his breath, his instincts screaming that this moment was significant. After a long pause, the man spoke, his voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. "You've come a long way, Sergeant," he said, his eyes never leaving Jack's. Jack's pulse raced. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady, but his mind was spinning with questions. The man smiled faintly, but there was something cold about the smile. "Someone who's been waiting for you," he said simply. Jack narrowed his eyes. "Waiting for me?" he repeated. "For what?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at the dogs. "These dogs have led you here for a reason," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "They know what's coming." Jack felt his heart skip a beat. "What's coming?" he asked, his voice thick with anticipation. The man looked at Jack, his expression serious now. "A choice," he said. "A choice you have to make." Jack's mind raced as the words sank in. What choice? He didn't know what was happening, but he could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of the decision that lay ahead. The dogs remained still, their eyes locked on the man, as if waiting for Jack to make the next move. Jack stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. The man stepped closer, his presence commanding, yet strangely reassuring. "You don't have to make it now," the man said, his tone softening. "But you will have to decide soon. The dogs will show you the way." Jack looked down at the dogs, his gaze meeting their unwavering eyes. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear, whatever it was, he was not facing it alone. With a deep breath, Jack nodded, ready to follow the path the dogs would lead him down. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, he was ready to face it. The man stepped back into the mist, disappearing as quietly as he had appeared. The dogs, as if on cue, turned and began to walk forward, their steps light but purposeful. Jack followed, trusting them completely, knowing that whatever was ahead, they would lead him through it. Jack followed the German shepherds through the thickening mist, each step feeling heavier than the last. The air had grown colder, the dampness seeping into his bones, but he didn't care. His mind was focused on one thing, the dogs. They had led him this far, and now, as he walked behind them, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were guiding him to something critical. Something he had to understand. The path ahead was narrow, winding through trees that seemed to close in around them. Jack could barely see beyond the fog, but the dogs moved with confidence, their every movement deliberate and purposeful. Jack trusted them completely. They had led him this far, and they wouldn't steer him wrong now. As they moved deeper into the forest, Jack's thoughts began to spiral. The man, the one who had spoken to him at the rest stop, had said something that still echoed in his mind, a choice. A choice. But what choice was there to make? Jack didn't feel like he was in control. It felt more like he was being pulled, guided by forces he couldn't quite understand. Was this the choice he had to make? Was he supposed to follow the dogs into the unknown, to trust them completely? Or was there something else he was missing? His feet dragged along the path, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, and the silence pressed down on him like a weight. The fog had grown so thick that he could hardly make out the shapes of the trees. The only sounds were the steady breathing of the dogs and the occasional rustle of leaves. Jack looked up ahead, his heart racing. The dogs had stopped. They were standing still, their eyes scanning the area, their bodies tense. Something was ahead. Jack took a step forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. He wasn't sure why, there was no immediate threat, but the dogs had tensed, and Jack knew he had to be ready. He took a deep breath and moved closer to them. The lead dog, the one with the dark fur and piercing amber eyes, turned its head slightly, as if acknowledging Jack's presence. It was waiting for him to understand. Jack knelt beside the dog, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. The dog's eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, Jack felt a connection, a bond that was deeper than anything he had ever experienced. The dog didn't need to say anything. Its gaze was enough. It knew what was coming. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as the other two dogs moved forward, their bodies low, their eyes focused on something just ahead. Jack stood and followed them, his body tense, his mind racing with questions. As he moved forward, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was ahead, it was something he couldn't turn away from. He had to face it. He had to trust the dogs. They had been leading him this far, and he couldn't stop now. The path ahead opened up into a small clearing. Jack stopped, his breath catching in his throat as he saw what lay before him. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered cabin. Its wooden walls were cracked and rotting, the roof sagging under the weight of years of neglect. The air around it felt heavy, charged with an energy that Jack couldn't explain. The dogs had stopped, standing still and watching. The cabin. Jack's eyes narrowed. What was this place? Why had they brought him here? As he took a step forward, the lead dog moved closer to him, standing at his side. It didn't bark or growl, it simply stood there, waiting. Jack swallowed hard and took another step forward. The fog seemed to part just enough for him to see the cabin more clearly. It was abandoned, forgotten by time, but something about it felt important. The dogs were still watching it, their eyes unblinking, and Jack couldn't help but feel like he had to go inside. He didn't know why, but he did. Jack moved toward the cabin, his heart racing. As he reached the door, he stopped, feeling a strange hesitation. The dogs were right behind him, their presence a silent reassurance. He reached for the door handle and pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the quiet clearing. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the scent of rot and decay. But in the center of the room, something caught his eye. A small, wooden box, sitting on a table covered in dust. Jack moved toward it, his hand trembling as he reached for it. What was inside? What had the dogs led him to? As his fingers brushed against the box, a sudden chill ran down his spine. He didn't know what this was, but he knew it was something significant. Something he had to discover. With a deep breath, Jack lifted the box. The dogs remained still, watching him with their knowing eyes. Jack opened the box slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, there was a small, folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully, reading the words written inside. It was a message. A message that would change everything. Jack unfolded the small, creased piece of paper slowly, his hands trembling slightly as the weight of the moment settled over him. The paper was old, its edges frayed, and the ink was faint but still legible. He squinted, reading the words that seemed to pulse with significance. Trust the dogs. Follow their lead. The truth lies ahead, but only those who listen can find it. Jack's mind raced as he processed the message. It was cryptic, just a few lines of text, but something about it felt like the key to everything that had been happening. He looked down at the German shepherds, still standing quietly by his side, their eyes locked on him, waiting. He could feel the silent pressure of their gaze, as if they were urging him forward, urging him to follow. The dogs knew something, and they had led him here for a reason. Jack folded the note carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket, and stood up. He had no idea what the truth was, but he knew one thing for sure, the dogs weren't just leading him to random places. They were guiding him toward something that could change everything. The air around him was still thick with fog, and the cabin felt colder now, more foreboding. He glanced around the room, taking in the cracked walls, the dust that had settled on the wooden floor, and the eerie stillness of the place. The cabin was abandoned, but there was something unsettlingly familiar about it, like it had been waiting for him. He turned toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space as he moved to step outside. The dogs had already begun to move, leading him forward once again. They were in sync, their movements smooth and fluid as they walked ahead. Jack followed, not knowing what lay beyond the cabin, but feeling an undeniable pull to continue. The fog was thicker now, enveloping everything in a soft, ghostly haze. As Jack walked, he noticed the sound of his footsteps was muted, drowned out by the quiet of the forest. It was strange, the way everything seemed so still, so silent, but he could feel that something was coming, something that would soon be revealed. He felt like he was on the edge of something big, but he couldn't see it clearly yet. The dogs moved ahead, their pace steady, but Jack could sense a change in the air. There was a shift, a quiet tension that hung in the mist like a whisper. They were getting closer to something, but what? The dogs led him to a small clearing just beyond the cabin. The trees surrounding it were tall and dense, their branches tangled with the weight of the fog. In the center of the clearing was a stone well, ancient and worn by time, its edges covered in moss and vines. Jack stopped, his breath catching in his throat. This was it. The dogs had brought him here for a reason. He stepped forward cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the well. The dogs stood by his side, their eyes never leaving the stone structure. Jack leaned over the edge of the well, peering into the darkness below. He couldn't see the bottom, just the inky blackness that seemed to stretch endlessly down. But there was something else, something different. A faint glow, barely visible, flickering at the base of the well. Jack's pulse quickened. He had no idea what it was, but he felt an overwhelming urge to find out. The dogs had brought him here, and he knew that whatever it was important. He looked back at the dogs, their amber eyes shining with quiet understanding. It was time to move forward. Jack reached down, carefully feeling along the stone edge of the well. His fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. He pulled it up, a small object, weathered by time. It was a key, old and tarnished, but unmistakable in its design. Jack held it in his hand, feeling the weight of it, the significance of it. This was it. The answer he had been looking for was within his grasp. But what did it unlock? The dogs looked at him again, their gaze unwavering, as if urging him to keep going. Jack took a deep breath and turned away from the well. He had the key. He had the answers he needed. It was time to follow the dogs. Time to uncover the truth. Jack stood in the clearing, the key still resting in his hand. The dogs, their eyes never leaving him, waited patiently. They had brought him here, to this moment, and now it was up to him to take the next step. He glanced down at the key, its cold, tarnished surface catching the faint light of the fog. What did it unlock? What was it a key to? His heart was racing as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. The air was thick with anticipation, and the stillness of the forest around him only heightened the sense of urgency. Jack took a deep breath, steadying himself, and turned back toward the well. The faint glow at the bottom of the well was still there, like a beacon calling to him, urging him to move forward. He stepped closer to the edge, holding the key tightly in his hand. The dogs remained by his side, their presence a constant reassurance. As Jack lowered himself to the well's edge, his fingers brushed against the cold stone once again. He could feel the vibrations of the key in his hand, as if it were alive, pulsing with energy. Without thinking, he reached out and carefully placed the key into the slot at the base of the well. A soft click echoed through the clearing. Jack froze. The glow at the bottom of the well intensified, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The ground beneath him seemed to tremble, and for a moment, Jack thought he could hear something moving, something coming to life. Then, the mist around them began to shift, swirling like a storm, and the air grew thick with a strange, almost electric charge. Jack stood still, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. The dogs looked up at him once more, their eyes filled with an understanding that Jack couldn't quite grasp. They knew what was coming. Jack did too, deep down. The truth, the answers he had been seeking, were within reach. Slowly, carefully, he began to step back from the well. The key had unlocked something, something powerful. As he turned to face the dogs, they began to move, their bodies gliding through the fog with a purpose. Jack followed, his steps more confident now, the weight of the key still in his hand. The path ahead seemed to open up, as if the fog itself was parting to allow them through. They walked in silence, but Jack felt the shift in the air. He could sense that they were nearing the end of this journey, that the answers he sought were just beyond the next bend. The forest was still and quiet, but there was a feeling of movement in the air, as if everything around them was watching, waiting. And then, as they reached the edge of the forest, Jack saw it. In the distance, just beyond the trees, was a structure, old and weathered, but unmistakably standing tall. It was a building, a place he had never seen before, but something in his gut told him this was where the journey was leading him. The dogs stopped in front of the building, their eyes locked on the door. Jack stepped forward, his hand still clutching the key, his mind racing with questions. This was it. The final step. He reached for the door, his fingers brushing against the cold wood, and with a deep breath, he turned the handle. The door creaked open slowly, and Jack stepped inside, the dogs following close behind him. The air inside was thick with dust and age, but there was something else too, a sense of history, of secrets long hidden. As Jack moved further into the building, he could feel the weight of what was to come. He didn't know exactly what he would find, but he knew it was time to face it. The dogs had led him here, to this moment. And now, with the key in his hand, Jack was ready to unlock the truth.